Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast. This is episode number 66. A big thank you to everyone who continues to tune in to this podcast, brought to you by the Hare Krishna Project, either on YouTube or Facebook. We get a lot of comments and feedback from devotees, not just in Britain, as wonderful as you all are, but from people all over the world who want to chat to the guest, who want to, engage with the guest. And as you know, we've developed a reputation for being quite straight talking, no hidden agenda. I was always taught at university to ask questions, ask lots of questions. That doesn't mean you're being critical of someone. You're just trying to engage and gather information and gather knowledge. And that's certainly something that we might be doing in today's podcast. I'm hugely honored and delighted to welcome our guest this week, Henry Doktorski. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Good to see you.
Hare Krishna, Narda.
Really, really grateful to you for being a guest on this week's podcast, all the way from the United States. Which part of the United States are you in?
Western California.
Wow, right over there. I think there's I think we worked out there was a 9-hour difference or 8-hour difference. Well, the furthest west I have to confess I've ever been is Galway in the Republic of Ireland, which is nowhere near the United States. So in a moment, it's going to be, to a lot of people, it will become apparent why you're the guest and what you're talking about. But let's just start off with a nice, easy question. Please tell us about you and where you're from.
Well, I grew up in New Jersey on the East Coast, and in college I became interested in Indian thought and did some transcendental meditation. And at my senior year, I wanted to really focus on my spiritual life, so I visited the TM University in Iowa, but I didn't like it. And then almost accidentally, I stopped at the new Vrindavan ISKCON farm community in West Virginia on my way home back to New Jersey. And I was very impressed. These people, they were vegetarians. The men shaved their heads, which shows their degree of renunciation. They wore this Bengali style traditional clothing, and they chanted on beads 2 hours a day. They went to this temple morning service. They worked for Krishna all day. And at least the single men in the ashram, there may have been 30 of us in the ashram, they slept on sleeping bags on the floor. And that impressed me, and to make a long story short, I tried it out and I liked it. And it was difficult at first, but then I had a conversion experience and wound up staying 16 years before I left.
Wow.
So 1978, and then I rejected my spiritual master, Kirtanananda Swami Bhaktipada, in 93, and then left with New Vrindavan in 94.
Wow, that's you just kind of gave a whirlwind kind of explanation or description of everything. I think the podcast is not that was great. I really, really appreciate that. So many guests give a very long, elaborate answer. Okay, so 1978, as a young man, you were interested in kind of Indian thought, spirituality, transcendental meditation. I wasn't aware that there were transcendental meditation colleges in the 70s. I'm not aware there was one in the UK, but I can possibly
Maharishi University in Fairfield, Iowa.
Wow. Yeah. My degree's in comparative religion, and it's actually how I first encountered ISKCON at university. I was studying them, and I studied a bit of TM. It was kind of a very comparative course, but I remember seeing photos of the Maharaji with his long beard and everything. Okay, so you were very impressed. You managed to stop off at this new Vrindavan community in West Virginia. Is that where it was? Yeah, in the late 70s. You were there for 16 years. Tell us about some of the services and activities and things that you took part in that time.
Well, I came just about a year before Prabhupada's Palace of Gold was dedicated. So my first year, I spent working on the palace, gold leafing, mostly gold leafing. I did some painting, stencil painting, not like, difficult work, and spent about 6 months from October 78 till March 79 working on a scaffold high up in the kirtan room, painting, drawing, stenciling designs onto the ceiling of Prabhupada's palace in the kirtan room. And it took me that 6 months to get all the way around there to finish that. And I used to keep, but I liked it. I really liked it, especially in the winter, because I don't like to be cold. The West Virginia winters are very cold. The building really wasn't heated, but they did have electric coils in the ceiling. So I never got cold, and I kept a bucket of water by my head. When I got sleepy, I would just like dump it on my face. That would wake me up and I could continue working.
Wow. Wow. So you were an initiated disciple of Kirtanananda Swami Bhaktipad. What was that like? Tell us about, meeting him and becoming a disciple of his. How did that happen?
Well, yeah, I first met him in August of 78, and he's the reason why I gave up graduate school. I was a piano major and decided to spend that semester at New Vrindavan studying Bhakti Yoga under his tutelage. I found him to be very wise, intelligent, and he loved music. Actually, as a child, he studied piano and actually played organ, the pipe organ at his father's church sometimes. The whole family was actually musical. And that's something that I respected, his wisdom, and his classes I thought were very revealing when he would speak, and I just saw him as a father figure, even more so than my own father, and that there may have been some void in my life from my upbringing as far as my relationship with my father, and he seemed to be a perfect father. So it was very, very sweet, and after some time, our relationship became very personal, and I spent many hours with him, especially during the interfaith era of New Vrindavan, when he began westernizing the temple services and the dress of the devotees. And I was the music director at that time at the community, so we spent lots of time together. So I just found him very, very inspiring, charismatic, certainly. And up until the end, up until the last couple of years, I began to see and hear things that made me lose that faith in him as a perfect spiritual authority.
From what I've seen from the photos of New Vrindavan, it was very extravagant. A lot of the things happening there with the I think Palace of Gold you mentioned, and the big Murti of Prabhupada.
Oh, right. Well, yes, of course, it was a preaching center. Even Prabhupada, he wanted, he allegedly told Kirtanananda to make it like Tirupati Temple in India, which is like one of the largest pilgrimage places in the world. And so Prabhupada's Palace of Gold was the first really ornate, beautiful shrine to be built, and then a new temple for the deities was built. Lots of gold plating on that. The Prabhupada's Palace had gold leafing, and then that giant Prabhupada statue. he was Bhaktipad wanted him dressed like Lord Buddha, in flowing robes with a big turban on his head, and we all helped build it. Actually, we had marathons where we'd slap on this ferro concrete, and then of course Somadas was the sculptor in charge of it, and he'd have to go correct our mistakes every night. But yes, it was intended to be a great place of pilgrimage. Great plans were an enormous temple and land of Krishna, which is like a spiritual Disneyland. Gondola rides, elephant rides, I mean the plans were very exciting, and I was very happy to help to raise money to produce a lot of this.
Is the giant Prabhupada Murti still there?
Now I hope you can insert pictures, like so people
Yeah,
can
I
see,
can insert pictures. Yeah, yeah.
right? See what this is. Your question was, oh no, it's not there. No, when New Vrindavan, when Bhaktipada was kicked out of New Vrindavan, he was actually rejected in '94, and the community returned to ISKCON. One of the requirements was that statue be removed, and it was destroyed, knocked off. In fact, Varshan Swami, who was in charge of heavy equipment, I believe he pulled it down with a bulldozer with a steel cable, and then smashed it up into this giant cigar-shaped mass of concrete and steel, and then with the bulldozer pushed it off the edge of the plateau where it rolled down this 500-foot cliff down to Wheeling Creek. It was arrested by a large tree. There's photos of that in my book, Old Guns and God, Volume 9.
So you kind of remain loyal to Kirtanananda to the end, until I think 93, 94. Why did you remain loyal to him until that time? I mean, did you see things before that you started to question, things that you were uncertain about?
It was because of the love in my heart for him that you stay very long. Even a child that may love a parent and the parent may be abusive, it's very difficult for that child to leave that abuse. I was not abused. I mean, at New Vrindavan, but I'm just giving an example that if you have a great love and affection for somebody, you're gonna tolerate a lot of things that people who don't have that love will instantly they'll question that, and they'll think something is off. And a lot of people saw something was off, but it took me 15 years before I really started to realize that things were off.
And just remind me, when did Kirtanananda go to jail? Which year and for how long was that?
Well, in '91, he lost a case, a racketeering case, and he spent 3 months in jail, and then while he filed his appeal, he was let out on house arrest for 2 years. He won that appeal, and then he was freed. All the convictions were overturned. And then in '96, the government did the retrial, and then he pled guilty at that trial because his chief enforcer, Thomas Drescher, Tirtha Swami, testified against him that he ordered the 2 murders of Chakrabarti and Sulochan. So he did go to prison. He was in prison a total of 8 years. He was let out. This is Malcolm, by the way.
Hey there.
And some devotees, they really like killing for Krishna, but when they found out that I let a cat live in the house, they really turned against me because they're unclean creatures. And but we get along, and I've never gotten sick because of people who live here. But anyway, yeah. So he spent 8 years in prison, and then was released. Fulfilled the term, and then came back out, went to live with his disciples in New York City.
So before we kind of get on to talking about Killing for Krishna and your other books, I'm just trying to maybe understand more about your own personal story after 1994, because of, what happened to you then? Did you go off and do something else? Did you become disillusioned with spirituality completely? What was happening to you then over the next 10 years or so?
Well, in April '94, I left officially and moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which was the nearest city where I thought I could make a living as a musician. and still be close to Vrindavan because my wife and two children remained there. She well, we had some friction and this and that, so basically she kicked me out of the house, you know. But anyway, so I'd come 3-4 times a week to visit sometimes, and then when my wife would go out on the pick sometimes, or to these landmark forum education classes, I would, you know, watch the kids for the whole weekend or something. Okay, now I'm going to put you down, all right? I don't, you know, I know he's a very affectionate kid. He's about 15 years old now.
Wow.
He's good at keeping mice away too. He haven't had any mice in the house. Of course, even if he wasn't, he probably wouldn't have mice in the house. So what was, oh, you're telling me, yes. So I left. I'm working as a church organist. I worked also, I played accordion, wedding receptions. And in the beginning, I had no idea how my bills were going to get paid because I had no regular income. And then, but at the end of the month, they all magically all got paid. Krishna sent me work. And I still had close connection with New Vrindavan. But I wasn't following my spiritual master. In fact, he was kicked out himself, you know, and then lived at this cabin south of New Vrindavan called Silent Mountain. So anyway, so I'm working and still hanging. You know, I have my many friends still at New Vrindavan, and around 2002, I think it was. That's about 8 years after I left, we had one visitor at the community. His name was Satyavrata Das from Toronto. And he was a Prabhupada disciple who played with our orchestra when I was the orchestra director and organist. And he started telling me stories about music that we had performed for the pleasure of Radha Vrindavan Chandra and the devotees. Hold on. That you hear that? That's my mother, and I'm not going to pick it up, guys. Sorry, I can't talk right now. She's 91.
Wow, that's amazing.
I will see her later today. So anyway, Satyavrata is telling me all these stories, and some of them I had totally forgotten. They might have been a decade earlier or 12 years earlier. And I realized, and the music at New Vrindavan, when I was music director, was Western music, classical music. We had a whole orchestra. Got to put a picture of our orchestra in one. I thought it was really good music, and translations from the Sanskrit and Bengali into English. Hayagriva, he's a great poet. Umapati Swami was also a poet who did translations. And I decided that I'm going to write an article about the music that we did, just so it wouldn't be lost to eternal time. And over 21 years, it grew and grew and grew. And now it's 12 volumes, Killing for Krishna, 11 Naked Emperors, and 10 volumes of Gold Guns and God, Swami Bhaktipada in the West Virginia Hare Krishnas. Now I'm finished. I can take a break now. I'm very happy. I wanted to finish these books before I die. They're history books, ISKCON history.
Yeah. And it sounds like they're a must read for any devotees, past and present. You know, I'm very strongly of the view that anyone in any organization, any religion, any institution needs to look at the history of that institution and look at the bad as well as the good. I have, for example, a small example. I have friends in the Church of England here in the UK who are, you know, they love the Church of England, but they also recognize it's got a past, it's got a history, and they're reformers within the Church of England trying to make it better and trying to change things for people and make it more inclusive. So 21 years is quite an achievement. Can we talk a bit now about what was happening in the 1980s in New Vrindavan, and in particular linked with one of your books, Killing for Krishna? Hopefully a lot of people watching this, listening to this, would have heard of an individual or a person called Sulochan, or also Steve Bryant. So I actually looked at your Facebook today. Today is July the 4th. This is the day we're recording this podcast, and it would have been Sulochan's birthday today.
He would have been 69.
Yeah. So I feel it's quite good that we're doing this today. I felt quite touched when I completely coincidental that we're doing it. Maybe it's not, it's someone else, it's Krishna's arrangement that we're
Both may be true.
yeah, both may be true. So tell us a bit about Sulochan, I guess. You knew him well, did you?
Yeah, he came to New Vrindavan with his wife in the spring of 1980. And during that time, beginning in March 80 until about 86, I was always out on the pick. I was a traveling Sankirtan devotee, and we'd go out for a month and then come back for a 3-day festival and go back out again. And I was a brahmachari too at that time, so I didn't hang out with householders. Sulochan was a householder, so I may have seen him at the temple during the festivals, but I did not know him. Years later, I did know his wife after they got divorced, and I taught piano to her children. This was back in the 90s, but in the 80s, I did not know him. And I may have heard. So see, I was a bliss boy. Some people would derogatorily call you, oh, he's just a bliss boy. He's like, it means he's totally out there, not aware of what's really happening. All I like to do was, chant Hare Krishna, eat prasadam, hang out. When we come back from the pick, we'd hang out at our spiritual master's house all the time, like to sleep in his basement, and I'd hang out with my brahmachari buddies. So there was a whole culture of fringies, we call them, the devotees who didn't strictly follow. But even my first week, I was instructed to avoid the fringies, even avoid householders, because a brahmachari doesn't hang out with householders, like this. So it wasn't until many, 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 many years later, after I'd been working on this book for a couple of years, I brought my manuscript. It might have had 300 pages to New Vrindavan, and I'm showing it to everybody. And most people are like approving. I met one of my buddies, one of my Sankirtan leaders, Tapapun Swami, and he said, he was like so excited. I got something I got to show you, Rishikesh. And this was around 2003. So we walk up behind the palace, across the street. It's this big old abandoned parking lot, and there's rotting cars there, and an old trailer truck, the trailer from a trailer truck. We climb up, he unlocks it, and he opens it up. And there inside are like dozens of boxes and filing cabinets with my spiritual master's personal library, which includes all his correspondence from the 1980s, some from the 70s up into the 90s, letters, filed away, and boxes of trial transcripts, investigative reports, tens of thousands of pages. It took me 10 years to get through everything in that. In fact, he gave it to me. Tapapun Swami, here, take this. You use it for your research. I had to rent a truck to get it to Pittsburgh, to my home in Pittsburgh. And here, sometime later, one box I discovered had investigative reports relating to the murder of Sulochan. And I was like shocked to read some of this, because we had thought that it was just one rogue murderer, Tirtha, who had shot Sulochan in Los Angeles twice in the head. But here's all these investigative reports revealing that there was 12 people involved in this murder conspiracy, including the temple president, who I was familiar with, Tapapun Swami himself, and one sannyasi very dearly loved at New Vrindavan, respected for his gentleness and humility, who now is an extremely popular ISKCON guru. And so So once I discovered this, oh my, and I was friendly with all these people, nearly all of them. I said the first book has to come out about the murder of Sulochan because uh, it was just like the conspirators covered it up so well. And here was documents that reveal who was involved and even how, how the surveillance and the hunting for him and everything that took place. I said, this is important. And so in 2018, January, Killing for Krishna was published. And
So
then following that, the other books.
So all of this paperwork that was discovered. So who had produced the paperwork? They were police files, or they were internal ISKCON documents.
There was a lot in there. There were trial transcripts, but when I say investigative reports, New Vrindavan, before they went to trial for this, they hired at least one, I guess you might call him a private eye or a detective, and he went and interviewed people about this murder. And I'm sure Prabhupada and his lawyers were, examining all this material. Some of the material, believe it or not, was from the Marshall County Jail, the correctional officers' logbooks relating to Sulochan's time when he spent a few months in the Marshall County Jail. And this is not something that any legitimate sheriff or head of the jail would be allowed to release to anybody. But there it was, photocopies of these logbooks and Bryant's personal mail. That is a very big offense, copying prisoners' mail and giving them away to people who want to kill this guy. All right. So there was a lot of, I considered it fascinating and very revealing documents in this particular box.
Mm. So just to add some context for some of our viewers and listeners who are, I don't know, at the under the age of 35 or something, or 40, is that Sulochan Prabhu, legal name Steven Bryant, was murdered in 1986 by people in ISKCON, leaders in ISKCON, after, hopefully I've got the context correct, after publishing or researching for a book that was eventually put together called The Guru Business. And I know you and I had some exchanged emails about this. So he had compiled some information to put into a book called The Guru Business. And the book was about, the detailed brainwashing of his wife, pedophilia, murder, racketeering, and other crimes, all committed and witnessed at New Vrindavan. And so as a result of him speaking out or about to speak out, he was murdered by ISKCON authorities.
Well, I wouldn't say ISKCON authorities. All right? I believe that most, at least in the United States, mostly ISKCON temple presidents and GBC, they knew this was happening. That New Vrindavan was hunting these people. But there was only 3 ISKCON temples, to my knowledge, that were involved in this. That's, of course, New Vrindavan, Cleveland, Ohio temple, which is in New Vrindavan zone, and Los Angeles, and San Diego also, in Rameshwar zone. I was certainly aware of the New Vrindavan hitmen that were searching for Sulochan in Los Angeles. And he told one of his check that I want you to cooperate with the New Vrindavan hitmen, and he did. And because of the cooperation, the LA people knew where to find Sulochan and Tirtha shot him. But I wouldn't drag ISKCON into that. It's New Vrindavan leaders the Cleveland ISKCON leader, which was Dr. Swami, and Rameshwar and his Chetru disciples that succeeded in doing it.
And your book, Killing for Krishna, and other publications are predominantly about that, about the murder.
My books, no, my books are, it's history. Now, the first book, Killing for Krishna, yeah, that's about the conspiracy, the murder of Sulochan, and the cover-up which follows. The other books, it's a general history. The 11 Naked Emperors is a history of the zonal Acharya era of ISKCON from like Prabhupada's death in 77 up until 87 when the GBC outlawed the worship, that the extravagant worship that the gurus were receiving at that time. And then the Gold Guns and God, those 10 volumes, is just a history. It's a biography of Kirtanananda Swami and the history of Vrindavan. And I talk about all the wonderful things, and I also talk about the things that weren't so wonderful, because I want to be objective. I don't want to I don't want to cover up things that people deserve to know about. As you said earlier, that you whether there's warts or not, you show what happened. And that's, in my opinion, a true, the best historians, they don't put their perspective on things. They just tell things the way it happened. And when there's controversial issues, I present both sides and let the reader decide.
And what kind of response over the years since you started writing and publishing have you had from ISKCON in terms of these books?
Any ISKCON opinions about my books there have been none official. All right, and but I have heard through my friends that are close to certain ISKCON leaders. One of my friends is close to one of the temple presidents, and he told me that he loved Killing for Krishna. But others, of course, they think it's a very, very bad thing to do. In fact, just a few days ago, I was in Louisville, Kentucky. I was invited to be a guest speaker at the annual convention of the International Cultic Studies Association. And they study different cults. And so I spoke about Gold Guns and God, and who should be in the audience but Anuttama Das and his assistant. And apparently he goes every year, as a participant, to listen to the talks and things like that. So we had a conversation after my presentation. He came to hear my presentation, and during the conversation, he said something to the effect that, "Oh, your books are exceptional, and you're an exceptional historian." And he pulled out of his bag a first edition copy of Killing for Krishna, which he had bought 5 years ago. And I was like very curious. I looked at it. It was the first edition purchased in January 2018, which he had given to his assistant to read and study this. So after he said this, I immediately just spoke up, and I'd never met him before. I had heard of him, of course. He's a GBC member in charge of communications. I said, "Oh, Anuttama," I said, "I can use this for promotional material now. You said that my books are exceptional and I'm an exceptional author." And he said, "Oh, but it has to be off the record." And he was joking, I think. So I'm telling you the story, and maybe I don't think he's going to get in trouble for it. I'll tell you one other thing, that one of my godbrothers, he lives in an ISKCON temple, and he gave one of the sannyasis there a copy of Volume 8 of Gold Guns and God. And I know this sannyasi personally. He used to live at New Vrindavan, and we always had cordial relationships. Although I haven't heard from him for quite a decade or 2 decades. But my godbrother told me, he said, Rishikesh, the next morning at Tulsi Puj, this sannyasi came over to me and he said, he must have started reading your book. And he said, he told me, he said, it's 10 volumes. Oh my Lord, this is like the Mahabharata, which is this enormous ancient Indian literature. And my godbrother said, don't mention my name or his name because I don't want any retribution from the institution. But speak by curiosity, just for fun. I did some research and I found out Mahabharata has about 1.8 million words. It's one of the longest histories in known to mankind. And then I took all my books and loaded the document and counted, the word count. My dodecology is 1.7 million words.
Wow.
It's like I can't believe it, But if you work at something for 21 years, I guess it can happen.
That's phenomenal. And what you've kind of alluded to this, but what has been your inspiration behind writing these books? Why did you feel the need? Maybe rephrase the question. What encouraged you to write and put all these books together over 2 decades?
Well, I would say Krishna. All right. Others might say Maya. All right. But the thing is, I really loved my spiritual master like a son loves a father. And when I discovered he was a cheater and just pretend spiritual master, there was like quite a painful thing in the heart. And I don't know for sure, but something like that may take years to get over, a process of this kind of thing. And then once I got the Swami Bhagavad archives, those tens of thousands of pages, and discovered a lot of these classified information, it was so revealing to me and so healing to me. Because see, the disciple, they're taught, if there's any doubt, it's your fault because you're not sincere enough. But here's all this classified documents which point that it was the leaders that were conning us. All right, so that was really in my own life a great source of healing. And since Killing for Krishna came out and the other books, I have received many emails from people who've read the book. One fellow who had been in ISKCON 12 years. He was seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist like twice a week because of the trauma he had experienced and trying to process that and get to a normal life again, And after he read Killing for Krishna, he told me, I only have to see him, my psychiatrist, once a month now, because it has like released this heavy burden from my mind and my heart. So these books, which I explain in the preface to Killing for Krishna, they're about healing, not hurting. They're about helping others, and if some people want to keep this stuff covered up, maybe it's because they may have been involved in it.
I think a comparison or something to compare it to today is this whole thing about child abuse, which has come up again in ISKCON over the last 2 years, and it's a whole big thing. But I'm going to mention one name, which is Lokanath Swami, and I produced a short film. I've produced 2 short films about Lokanath Swami over the last 18 months. And I've had correspondence following both. And the correspondence falls into two camps. So you've got those people saying, this is fantastic. Well done for speaking out. Well done for speaking your mind and saying what you think. And then you've got the others that say, why are you airing our dirty laundry in public? This should be dealt with behind closed doors, you know? And I mean, my response to that is it's not being dealt with behind closed doors, you know? The authorities aren't dealing with it. And I am trying to encourage devotees. I get a lot of devotees now get in touch with me because I produce these podcasts that I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, and I actually can't really help. I can listen, but I can't really help people. I had a devotee get in touch with me 6 months ago. She rang me, I won't mention the name of the temple, and said she was being abused at an ISKCON temple in the UK, and this was what was happening. And that she'd gone to ISKCON Resolve and gone to the National Council and gone to this and gone to that. And 6 months later, nothing's been resolved. No meetings have taken place. And what I said to her 6 months ago still stands now. Just go to the police. Go to the police. I hate this thing that happens in ISKCON that is, we're just like other religious groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons, where it's dealt with behind closed doors. Why are we dealing with things behind closed doors? Just go to the police, go and see a lawyer, you know. That's what the state authorities are there for. So I can see, so in terms of what you're saying, in terms of a comparison for today, the whole child abuse issue is rearing its ugly head again, and people, you know, and it makes me angry when people want to keep it quiet. You know, they want it to be dealt with. You know, what about the victims of child abuse? You know, don't they deserve a voice? Don't they deserve to be heard? So I guess that's kind of a comparison for today. I think my next question is around kind of the future in terms of what lessons can the Hare Krishna community, and I mean that in its broadest sense, what lessons can the Hare Krishna community learn from the past to ensure that they don't happen again in the future, assuming that they haven't or aren't. But what can we learn from like the events of New Vrindavan in the 1980s?
You know, Anuchana had asked me almost the exact same question when I saw him last week. And I just told him that I don't have an answer to that. However, regarding the history, which is what my books are about, that if one does not understand how we got to where we are now, then these atrocities can happen over and over and over again. So that's why we can learn what happened there and hopefully avoid similar situations. My subtitle for Killing for Krishna is The Danger of Deranged Devotion. And I was devoted to my spiritual master, but I didn't realize at the time it was a deranged devotion because he was not a worthy object of the disciples' devotion. He was a pretender, a cheater. And so the best that we can do is to teach people, just don't give your heart away without some investigation beforehand, because you can be cheated. And thousands and thousands of us were cheated by Kirtanananda Swami, and thousands are still being cheated. You know, his Indian and Pakistani disciples are building like 50-foot tall samadhi for him in Vrindavan, India, right on the Parikram Marg.
Wow.
You know, they believe that all these lawsuits in America, it was just a scam against him. They think that ISKCON should not have expelled him in '87. The ISKCON leaders were envious of him. And then, you know, when he was caught in bed with a teenage male disciple, those were their story is that actually they were ISKCON people who drugged Bhaktipad and then they molested Bhaktipad. It's so pervertedly twisted in their minds because they must believe this man can take them back to Godhead. You know, their lives are so dependent on that they can't, any information which contradicts their cherished beliefs is automatically rejected. So they're building this guy's samadhi. You know, it's like it's Suresh Prasad, one of my friends. He wrote the foreword to volume 9, and at the end of the volume 10, he says, there's two things I can say about Kirtanananda Swami and his followers. They have discovered a secret for success because they're expanding in India, they're expanding in Pakistan. They've got several beautiful large temples and guest houses, and they're building this huge samadhi, which some people claim is shaped suspiciously like a phallic symbol, which is something that Bhaktipat really enjoyed playing with, but with his teenage disciples. But then Suresh says they found a secret for success, and he said the second thing I'm sure of is that all these people are worshiping a pedophile. And that's your deranged devotion, really, you know, in my opinion.
And what is the status of you've kind of answered this already, but what is the status of Kirtanananda's mat now? I mean, was there a successor, or have there been successors to his organization or his group?
In his will, about a year before he died, he designated one successor, and that is Madhusudan Das Bapuji, who a Pakistani disciple who's been in India for several decades, and he built the 4-story Ulhasnagar temple. But before he died, he said, all my disciples can initiate. So, but in his will, it specifically mentions just one disciple.
Yeah, because for the research from my book, which was particularly about the movement in the UK, I did try and see if I could find any disciples of Bhaktipad in the UK, which I didn't, or certainly nobody was owning up to be a disciple of his, because I wanted to actually include them, you know, again in the spirit of being objective, but I couldn't track any down. We have actually interviewed another disciple of Kirtanananda on this podcast around 15 episodes ago. Her name now is Lalita. She now is involved with the Nityananda line, or Nityananda Parivar. So, you know, most of the mats in the West are in the Sarasvat line from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, but she now has taken shelter of a guru in the kind of Nityananda line. I don't know if Lalita was her name then, or Lalita is a name that's been given to her now, but she's a, you know, American lady, I'd say probably in her mid-70s. But yeah, so you know, quite interesting how you're the second disciple, if you like, of Kirtanananda on this podcast. Okay. I know our time's a bit limited today, but I've really enjoyed this almost an hour kind of whistle-stop tour of the last 40 years of New Vrindavan and various things that have been happening. And I really appreciate you giving up your time to do this podcast, you know, and willing to kind of speak openly about your publications and about, you know, your time at New Vrindavan in the 80s.
Well, it's my pleasure, Narada Prabhu. I am really happy that we had a chance to talk and share some of the history of ISKCON with your listeners.
And I think certainly before I hit the record button, I did share with you that your books have been an inspiration to many devotees in the UK. Certainly in the research from my book, quite a few devotees mention your name, mention that they'd read Killing for Krishna, which had helped shape their views and help them with their, I wouldn't say spiritual life, but I'd say religious life. You know, where do they feel a sense of belonging or affiliation in terms of mats and sanghas? So your name came up several times, and which was good. So I'll say goodbye to the viewers and listeners at home, and we'll have a very brief debrief after. So a big thank you to Henry Doktorski for being our 66th guest on this week's edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast. And in a minute, we'll let him go so we can go and chat to his mother, who's wait. I panic as well when I get a call from my mum, and if I reject it, I feel a bit, I need to call her back soon. So a big thank you to Henry, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. If you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, please do put a positive comment. If you're watching it on Facebook, please do love, like, or care for it. Please do send us your feedback along with this broadcast. I will be putting links to a lot of Henry's books and his website, so you can find out more about him and read his biography. And there's lots of fantastic stuff online about the wonderful work that Henry's done over the years to showcase those certain times within ISKCON. So until next week, we'll see you all soon. Thank you. Hare Krishna.